the outlet to our marriage. 6 years ago, my wife and I are both in our mid-40s, and we've been together basically forever. Began dating in high school, married while in college, and we will have been married for 24 years later this year, together for 29. We have 3 kids: a college student, a high school student, and a middle school student. Fun times there. Both of our careers are currently in outstanding shape. We live in a coastal area where it's warm. That should be enough for now. The E took place from roughly summer of 2012 through the spring of 2013. I suspected the other man of having an interest in my wife early on and began to suspect my wife of at least having a crush on him. But my head kept telling me there's no way this sweet little gal of mine could engage in such a thing, and I had nothing whatsoever by way of proof. I also had my head buried in my own world at the time, as I was in deep depression from 2011 through the spring of 2013. So, let's back up and explain how we got to the 2012 to 2013 EA, and the depression that, while does not excuse my wife's behavior, certainly helped the cause and kept me from being my normal self. The normal me would have been all over this and would have had my radar up and would have certainly been more vigilant. That I suspected something and didn't dig into it immediately is the hardest part of all of this. It's overwhelming me at times. The biggest thing that caused this, though, boundaries. We had never really established clear boundaries for the opposite gender, workmates, etc. The particulars: in 2010, I was managing a division of a large manufacturing firm. Unfortunately, this was right smack dab in the middle of the recession, and this particular sector was floundering. My management team had shrunken from 8 people to 3, and I was working long hours and often bringing work home. I was in a precarious position, to put it mildly. My wife, on the other hand, was assistant manager and nursing leader for a busy operating room at a medium-sized hospital, and her career was riding a steadily upward trajectory. In the summer of 2010, the hospital brought on 2 young surgeons, both early 40s at the time, to replace part of an aging staff. Yep, you guessed it, a doc and nurse affair. From early on, my wife came home excited about the new hires, and the excitement seemed to be not about the doctors themselves personally, but rather that the hospital had hired a couple of young, vibrant, personable, fun guys that were apparently respectful and affable with the nursing and/or staff. Turns out they were very affable. Soon, though, my wife talked about one of them in particular quite often. She would come home talking about the jokes he would tell and how funny he was, how he was a triathlete, so he and my wife had something in common. Wife is an avid runner, marathons, and so forth. I mentioned that she sure was talking about this guy a lot and asked if she had a crush on him. She laughed it off, stating that he's just a fun guy like you are, babe. You'd like him. He's always cutting up and keeping it light-hearted. Don't be silly, he's just more open and friendly than all of those old docs we're used to. I thought she's right, and she would never in a million years find someone else charming enough to actually fall for them. Last sentence sound familiar? Anyone? This pattern continued into 2011, and I became more and more immersed in trying to salvage my job. Eventually, by late spring, our division was shut down, and operations moved to the Far East. The company offered a nice severance for those who wanted to pursue or continue their education. My wife encouraged me to take it, and to take a couple of years off to finish my degree and be a stay-at-home dad while doing so. I had not finished my degree, as my parents were killed in a car accident at the end of my sophomore year in college, and I left school to help run the family business for a few years. So, reluctantly, I decided to take her up on it. It wasn't long, though, before I slid into depression, and then into deep depression. The whole idea of being a SAHD and a full-time student was very emasculating to me, particularly when I would attend a work function for my wife, and all of these doctors would ask, "So, OP, what do you do?" Not fun, and I soon began lashing out at my wife on a regular basis. I simply wasn't very pleasant to be around. I suppose I was subconsciously resenting her thriving career, but I was most definitely resenting her always coming home in a good mood and talking about her new friendships, especially the one with the other man. By winter and into spring of 2012, they were becoming closer as friends, though I rarely saw her texting him. I checked her phone a few times but never saw anything alarming. A few texts from the other man, but mostly about cases and patients, with the occasional link to some running events and so forth. Note, my wife paid the bills at this time, and if I had ever bothered to open a bill and compare to her phone, I would have seen a number of deleted texts beginning in the summer of 2012 and into 2013. Meanwhile, I was mired in schoolwork, taking as many as 5 classes each term in an effort to finish as quickly as possible. I was in a depression funk. I was doing all of the household work, handling the kids, and was bogged down in schoolwork for a difficult degree program, so I just didn't pay attention to the signs. We were fighting fairly often, about nothing in particular. Our physical life, well, it sucked. 3 times per month was considered often for us, with once or twice being the norm. She wasn't on her phone much, at least, not in front of me, or hiding it, but something was just different. That gut feeling that something with her and this guy just wasn't on the up and up. By this time, the other man was showing up at all of her running events. I accused her of having a running boyfriend and a stalker. We fought hard over this, with her vehemently denying he was anything other than a work colleague or casual friend. I had no proof, her hours were accounted for, and I always went to her running events, so they certainly weren't hooking up before or after a race. Still, my gut and the way they interacted just seemed a little too comfortable, if that makes sense. But again, not my sweet little wifey. She's right, I'm the crazy one. And he was always cordial if not downright buddy-buddy with me when I was around him. It was easy to see why my wife let her guard down around him. Moving into 2013, I was finishing up school and had just landed a really good job that would start in late spring. Wife and I were up and down, still fighting occasionally and still mentioning the other man every now and then. Once my job started, my focus shifted. I also started slowly climbing out of the depression hole as my confidence started to grow. Oh, I also started working out more during this new phase. I always worked out some before all of this and was in pretty good shape, but I took it up a couple of notches here. And for those wondering, the OM wasn't better looking than me. We were on equal footing with me holding a slight advantage. I mentioned that he was a triathlete, but he sucked at it. My wife always finished well ahead of him in any events they were in. Around early summer of 2013, something changed in my wife. She would come home in not so great moods and didn't mention OM for several weeks. By the fall of 2013, things were changing at the hospital as well. They were planning a merger with a larger healthcare system and were already cutting back. The other man was a visiting MD as it was and had cut back his caseload tremendously at wife's hospital to 1 day per week with the occasional weekend on call. Wife was not on his on-call team, if you were wondering. Wife's hours and her team's hours were cut drastically. My wife and I basically switched places. It was now my career that was soaring, and hers that was in a funk. By the end of 2013, she took a job as a fill-in as needed or nurse and supervisor for a thriving surgery center a half-hour away. This is a key moment, as it would eventually get her away from OM for good. By spring of 2014, wife was in a depression herself, watching the or she worked so hard to build crumble and be taken away. Her duties at the new location were growing though, and she was offered a management position which she accepted by late spring. She had mentioned over the previous few months how Dr. Other man had changed. They were no longer friends and he was berating her and staff out in the open on a regular basis. When her team threw her a going away party as she left permanently for the new job, I attended. Other man was there that day but did not come by to say goodbye or anything, not sure if he knew I was there or not. Wife mentioned later that it bothered her that after the years and cases and runs and everything that he didn't bother to show up even for a piece of cake. It bothered me, pissed me off that she was bothered, but, again, she explained it away. However, my head was no longer buried in the sand as it was from 2012-2013, and I was concerned that I had missed something. I was damn right. That she left for a much better situation and left his presence altogether sort of pushed my curiosity away though. I was now paying the bills with my wife, and I never saw a text from him, and she didn't mention him after she left other than to say she was glad to be away from him and that I guess he was a jerk after all. I checked her phone a few weeks after she left, and she had deleted his contact from her phone. The next few years saw healing in our relationship and both of our careers take off. My wife is now at the top of her game and has great people around her, no toxic friends, not out-of-line doctors, a great overall situation. I know her workmates very well, no concerns here, and boundaries are in place. I'm also doing well in my career, having garnered numerous awards and so forth over the past several years. Finances are good and our kids are all doing well for the most part. In 2015 we went on an extended vacation for just the two of us, and that seemed to be the catalyst to spark the romance again. Fast forward to 2018, we were drawing closer than ever. Good to great physical life, supportive of each other, completely transparent with phones and other devices, etc. Still, in the back of my mind, I always wondered if something beyond friendship happened between Dr. Other man and her. I joined TAM last year, and all of a sudden, I was very concerned after reading some stories in this very forum. I read the standard evidence-gathering post, which while I thought would not help since so many years had passed, did actually help and ended up really helping to disprove some things. Into 2019, our relationship was amazing, to say the least. Extremely supportive of each other, dates at least once per week, often for the whole weekend, physical life better than I could possibly imagine. Then, a bomb dropped from out of nowhere. In early Feb, my wife and I were talking about a couple we knew where the husband had cheated. I made the statement that I just couldn't believe that this guy would ever do anything like that. My wife's response floored me. You never know. Anyone can cheat given the right set of circumstances and no boundaries. I mean, I myself could have been in trouble. She tapered off and tried to change the subject, but I knew she was trying to tell me something and I knew my fears were about to come to light. I let this go for a few days while I tried to gather my thoughts and formulate the questions I needed to ask. My wife, I'm sure, also needed to know that if she confessed, I wouldn't revert to my old ways of yelling and talking down to her. I hadn't done that in years, and I'm sure she was concerned that this would set me back and also destroy the marriage. On February 23rd, D-Day hit. I asked the questions and got detailed answers. The pain of confirming my suspicions, and that I had my head buried in my own depression and my own world. It has utterly shocked me to the core. As the confession wore on, we talked for hours. I was adamant that I just didn't believe her. I thought it was a full-blown paw, and besides, how would I know? I told her about the app and so forth, but would need the old phone and the old laptop. She said, "Wait right here." She never threw out the phone. In fact, her last 3 phones are sitting in her closet, and the laptop was in a storage closet as well, along with my old college laptop. We ended up using several apps, and I called the cell provider to provide old phone records so we could compare the numbers. Almost 100% of texts were recovered simply by restoring her phone from iTunes. I'm now a believer in these recovery apps. She was also very open, extremely remorseful, and offered to take a poly. She showed me a stack of 3-4 books on infidelity that she's read over the years, so she was prepared. I declined on the poly, as I believe the texts helped to confirm things, and that same gut that told me something was amiss all those years ago now tells me that she's fully transparent. Some of you veterans may disagree here, but since she brought up the poly and I have these text messages which indicate things did stop when she says they did, I'm convinced. My therapist agrees. Yes, I went to IC just 3 days after D-Day, and have been going a couple of times per month since. It has helped. The affair began in late spring of 2012. Started with him pumping her up, "Can't run this or without you. You are so amazing" type of text, with wife just being gracious and so forth. That led to "You are an amazing person" to eventually "You are so beautiful" to "Damn girl, you are so hot in those purple scrubs" to much worse. By late 2013 it was texting no pictures, and he never asked for any or sent any. He was married as well, and most of the texts were during work hours while he was on his office days and not around, or just after work, which is why I never saw her acting suspicious around her phone. She wasn't texting him often from home, and I never saw her checking her phone on weekends if we were out and about. It wasn't every day either, not even every week. And it would be a dozen or less texts, not hundreds, and not for days on end, which is what I had expected to find. So, while it was bad and was an affair, it could have been much worse, and was definitely headed that way. Despite my wife's protests, I think if she hadn't left this particular job and if I hadn't climbed out of my mental funk, I know in my heart it would have turned into a PE. You can only talk so much about this stuff before you do it, and opportunities would have been there. She also never disparaged me or the marriage, only positive things about me. She never told him she was falling in love with him. It was strictly friendly banter, then flirting, and yes, more explicit and suggestive texts. Wife once asked him, "What is this?" His answer, "Just having some fun." As far as how do I know, it didn't go physical. A couple of months before it ended, he tried to kiss her. It was after a case and people were just in the next room over, cleaning up. Wife had to bring some charts into his desk area for signature. As she handed the chart off, he moved in and quickly put his lips on hers. She pushed him away immediately, according to her. She offered this up and all other affair details before we got the text, BTW. The text immediately after went like this: "And why did you push me away? You've given every indication you would do that and more. Now I have egg on my face and feel like a fool. Wife, I'm sorry. I know what I said in our text, but as you said before, that was all in fun and not real. I'm not an affair person. My husband and I are true loves, and we can't do this. I'm sorry. And you're right. I'm married too and love my wife. Still, I need more than that. I feel so close to you. I can't stand it. Can we at least try this again?" Wife, "I don't think so. Too many people around anyway. We have too much to lose with our careers as well. Him, "Then let's go somewhere. After work next week. I'll figure something out so you are comfortable." Wife, "No, not going anywhere. Not going to be comfortable with that. Got to go." No response from him. This essentially corroborates her story. Wife is very remorseful over this, as she knows it wouldn't have happened without her active, flirty, and dirty texting participation. The texts really cooled after this episode, then ramped back up one last round. He kept asking on multiple occasions for my wife to meet him somewhere or come to the on-call lounge or something. Wife always said no or made an excuse. Finally, he said, "One last time, hop in my car and go with me somewhere please." Wife responded, "No. I'm not now or ever going anywhere with you or doing anything physical with you. I'm married and love my husband." His response then, "This is over, don't contact me again." And that was basically it. There were a few work-related texts, and he tried at one point to start things up again, but my wife's eyes were now open and the fog had been lifted. She shut him down and finally texted him to text her subordinate, with patient in case details going forward. "Don't text her again." He texted her back with one word, "tease." And soon after this she left altogether, which is also key. A few months later, he was caught in the act by his own wife with a hospital secretary. My wife and I discovered recently that he has destroyed no fewer than 3 marriages, and very nearly ours. That no one knows about this affair with my wife is a miracle unto itself. Our theory is that since he got shot down, he wouldn't dare talk about it. He's in another city, about an hour away. I saw him recently at an airport nearby. Looks awful. Gained weight, aged badly. This does my heart good. So, you might ask, why am I here? I have what I feel is the knowledge I need to make an educated and calculated decision. Wife and I are both in IC. I told her it was mandatory if she wanted me to. No objection from her. R is going as well or maybe better than expected. I've come a long way since leaving the house for a week, starting the day after D-Day. Great decision. I was able to break down completely and not be clouded by anything other than my raw emotions. Wife has been so transparent since D-Day, it's even a bit silly. You'll see a new contact on my phone, Jane Doe. She's a new scrub tech. Here's her Facebook page so you know it's her and not some whole doctor sort of thing. So, I'm here for 3 reasons. 1. It was therapeutic to type all of this out, especially to an audience who gets it. 2. Hoping to hear other takes on this story. For those that have chosen to R, what are the things you'd do over again if given the chance? 3. Hoping to help others with my story. And I'm still struggling with the length of time she held this in. Lying to my face all of those times before, during, and after the affair that there was nothing to it. But I'm working on it, and I'm way ahead of the curve right now. Wife is doing all of the right things, and has been nothing but remorseful, sorrowful, and has been understanding on the days when I just can't talk. We're back to date nights and pretty much a normal routine. Yes, read several books me, including MMSL. That, I see, and TAM forums have been a godsend. If there's one big thing I can say in closing, it's this. I see plenty of posts on here every week to the effect of "Is my wife cheating?" The big thing is, if you know your spouse and know them well, and you should, trust your gut. Don't delay. Had I been vigilant and present and guarding the marriage as I should have, I would have trusted my instincts and blew this thing up before it really got started. I buried my head in the sand and paid the price, very nearly the ultimate price. Don't let this be you. One final thing, I saved this for last, as many will turn away if they see God or anything religious in a post. Short and sweet spiritual life was terrible from about 2008 to 2012. We're in a great church now with a pastor that has openly talked about his own relational struggle and the value of both IC and MC. He'll come and have a beer with me, just a genuine guy with real understanding of what this Jesus thing is. This has also helped tremendously and helped greatly to rebuild our relationship in 2013 present. Let me say this about the other man, the wife he was with when he was cheating with my wife. She was the product of his first known affair. She was an employee at another hospital he worked at. I mentioned in my opus that his wife caught him with someone fairly soon after my wife. Well, his office manager tipped his wife off. She caught them earlier and snooped enough to know they were meeting at his office. The wife showed up, stormed in, and got them on video. She exposed them both, but both eventually left before being fired. We were lucky. I think he was in a miserable relationship and wanted to sabotage it. Hate guys like this. I want to make sure that I'm not blinded by anything. I can state for certain that I never had cause for concern before and have not since. But I'm watching things with an eagle eye now, and with the attitude that every guy she comes in contact with is a potential AP. I'm checking texts, emails, Facebook, Messenger, call logs, everything I can. We have an app that tracks all our whereabouts in the family, had it for years. Used it mainly for the teenagers, but I watch it for other reasons as well. If it can happen to us, then it can certainly happen to anyone. While cheating is never excusable, circumstances can certainly support it and almost encourage it, especially when boundaries are weak or non-existent. For the record, my wife has owned it from D-Day on. She's well aware of the damage caused and seems to understand the effort I'm going to require from her if this reconciliation is to work for the long haul. Still, it won't be easy to rebuild trust, and her profession, well, it is what it is, but her boundaries are light years ahead of where they were. Her actions, at least so far, are encouraging. We had a long talk earlier today. I've constructed a detailed timeline and we walked through it. Extremely painful, but very helpful as well, just to feel there's a better understanding of the particulars. I think with my wife, and this is her theory as well, he took his time with her because he knew had to. She was a cut above the average skank he had flings with. My wife was a decorated nurse and has a strong reputation in the community, lots of community service, outreach, etc. She was Employee of the Year at this hospital just a few years before he showed up. She wasn't going to be one where he might say, "Hey, let's go for a quickie in the closet," right off the bat. He had to be calculated if he wanted the ultimate payoff. He was more patient in his tactics, but I think it was thrill of the hunt for this sicko as much as anything. And he won. She may have escaped the cage, but he certainly caught her in his trap. Polly, my wife, is the one who brought it up, offered to take a poly while disclosing, which, yes, could be a ploy, but doesn't feel like it. I don't sense dishonesty at this point. She appears to have done her research and was pretty well prepared for D-Day. She knew it would come someday, she admitted. She had also read How to Help Your Spouse Heal from Your Affair just late last year, kept a copy in her glove box, so she was planning on talking at some point, it seems, with or without my prodding. Not sure that makes me feel any better, just food for thought. The text, I think the texts are the absolute reason he went in for a kiss and acted shocked that she pulled away. He was telling her point blank what he wanted to do to her, and she was not stopping it, though she would often say something like, "Now that's not something I would do. Gross. Or wouldn't you just like to hold me instead? You've never even touched me and you may want to do this. Why does it always have to turn to dirty talk with you? Or Doc, let me remind you that we're both married or something." But she would also say things like, "That sounds nice. I wish we could, but I'm married, or a response to him like, well, what would you do if was there sitting in your lap, then responding to that in kind. It wasn't benign, it was pure filth. It would be enough to cause me to have extreme guilt for certain. But I get what you are saying, and it's not lost on me, I can assure you. I'm not burying my head in the sand these days. I'm lucky in this aspect. The only portion I'm missing is about 2-3 weeks of texts from late 2014 when she upgraded her phone. However, she had already left the hospital by this time, and had no communication from him for several months leading up to that upgrade, and none after, and his contact was deleted that year as well. And for those that wonder, there are no gaming apps or third-party texting apps on the old or new phones. It was standard iMessage, which was unbeknownst to them, smart people, that they are a little careless. The texts give me hope, as I fully expected to see damn, last night was hot, or can't wait to meet you in the lounge after the last case, or descriptions of how much he liked certain body parts, or worse yet, how much she liked his parts. Haven't seen anything that indicates such, only texts where he complains that they weren't, or where he called her a tease, or the ones where she declined his propositions. It gives me hope, and right now, I'll take that. I also don't get the vibe that she's trickle-truthing, but I'm watching for any signs whatsoever. Believe me when I tell you I'm taking this seriously. I want to believe what she's told me and that the texts are all that there is. But she lied to me, and for a long time. Trust has to be earned back, and while there wasn't a hint of anything before this guy or after, this did happen, regardless of the circumstances. One thing I have not mentioned, and it really just slipped my mind, sorry, things are still a blur at times. One thing I really articulated to her: you have to tell me if there was any physical contact, because my health is at risk if you did something. She said there was no concern there. I also am watching body language and for any hints that she's even nervous when answering. I didn't see anything here, but lack of an STD hardly clears her from physical contact. We all know there's more to bonding than pick or ex job. At least it certainly is in my mind. Still, I don't get hints of deception here. She also knew I was having a prostate screening and PSA blood test roughly 1 month into discovery. Prostate cancer runs in both sides of my family. I started getting checked every year at age 42. I asked her if there was any need to be checked for STD while getting the blood and urine tests. Her answer: there is absolutely no reason to get checked. But if it will make you feel better, then this would be a good time to get checked. I really got the vibe, as the conversation wore on, that her only concern was what the doctor might think. But we both agreed that he and the lab techs see this every day. They think nothing of it, and they certainly don't know who may have been cheating between the two of us. Anyway, I went through with it, and everything was clean and clear. PSA good as well, for those that are curious. I handed her the lab results and she mentioned the PSA being good, then only mentioned the other by saying that it hurt that she had put me in a position where I felt I had to be checked, and she understood why I did it. I know this doesn't clear her. Other man is a doctor after all, so he could be clean. Protection could have been used. We're set for the exam next Tuesday. I told the wife last night to understand that I might do this at any time, so she's at least aware, but not of the date. I have it scheduled for late in the day so work won't be an issue. The examiner is well versed. He's worked several high-profile cases in our state and is now retired and does this privately. He sees dozens of these cases every year and went over what to expect. I'll be in a room with a two-way mirror and intercom. He says this puts the subject more at ease and helps increase accuracy. He also said point blank, I've done enough of these and seen enough that I can tell you if she's lying regardless of what the machine says. He helped me formulate and condense the questions. He prefers 4 or 5 but is allowing 6 here considering the length of time that has passed. If she passes with the questions that are going to be asked, then with that, her attitude, the texts, and well, knowing my wife as I feel I know her, I'm going to be satisfied and no true reconciliation is possible, and a huge hurdle will have been jumped. If she doesn't pass, well, I know what I have to do. Either way, I'll be able to look myself in the mirror and say that I've done all that I can do. 1. It's been more than 6 years since this ended. That might be dozens of women later for him, and would he even remember things correctly? And 2. He's a real liar. No telling what story he might concoct. When the affair ended, it got ugly with 2 episodes. My wife texted him a few weeks after it ended. Last contact was from him saying, "Then this is over," and then a follow-up text calling her a tease. Here's the convo, pretty much verbatim. Wife, we need to talk about this. Other man, talk about what? Wife, why you're treating me and the other nurses so badly all of a sudden. You and I both know why. Other man, I'm just working and you all need to get your bottom in gear. Wife, that's ridiculous and you know it. We are the best crew by far, working hard. You're treating us bad and me in particular because of what happened between us, and what I wouldn't do with you. Other man, what the hell are you talking about? Wife, you know damn well. Other man, you're crazy. Leave me alone. Wife, stop mistreating us. Other man, you're crazy. What happened between us? Enlighten me. Wife, you know what happened. The flirting, the dirty texting. You are asking me to go places and do things. I wouldn't do any of it, and now you're showing me who you really are. But stop this. We have to work together. Other man, do you have proof of this text and flirting? Wife, you know I didn't keep them. Other man, like I said, this is in your mind. Leave me alone. They had one more exchange. About 2 weeks later, similar banter but ended like this. Wife, either stop the yelling, berating, and snatching instruments or I'm going to HR and BOD. Other man, you do that and it'll ruin you too. Who you think they are going to side with? A nurse or a doc who brings in money? You better back off. Wife, I'm serious. Stop. Now. No response from him, but both texts were straightforward gaslighting from him. About 3 days later, my wife got offered the full-time position at the other place she had been working and turned in her notice and was gone. I can find no contact via text, call, or any other means since that last text above, and that much I believe to be true 100%. I share this to show a few things. 1. How quickly he showed who he was. 2. How much of a snake and liar he is. 3. That it ended badly, and I think this helped shake the cobwebs out and lift the fog completely for my wife. His ugliness helped, no doubt. I'm just not sure about talking to this cat. I'd love to meet him and show him my copies of the texts. I'd love to talk to him, just not sure it will productive. I have tracked down his ex-wife. I may reach out to her to see if she knew anything. She caught him soon after all of this with that other lady, so it's possible she's uncovered more, or at least knows about this. Regardless of whether I talk to this guy, the Polly is going to tell the tale for better or worse. I'm also quite certain it eats him up inside that she's one that got away, so to speak. He lost patience at the end. He should have stayed on the same trajectory, but he tried to skip a few steps, and then, once rejected, completely lost his professionalism as well. My wife says 2 of the other nurses asked point blank, why are you being so mean to her? He gaslighted them as well with what are you talking about? I'm just trying to get the work done. Had a few minutes this morning. The source that is telling about the OM is a gentleman I've known for close to 15 years. He was a surgical scrub tech when my wife first moved from ICU to the OR. Retired military and great guy. I'd trust him with my life. Anyway, he ended up working on the OM on-call team, and even ended up going with OM when he was doing cases at his other hospital. He, like so many others, was fooled in the beginning. He was taken in by his magnetic personality. I reached out to him in confidence about my situation. I didn't tell him they had an affair, just told him I suspected some things and wondered if he ever saw anything. He did begin to see certain things around the time the year with my wife was ending, but it wasn't with my wife. He says if anything was happening between them, he had no idea, and that OM never talked about my wife in that manner. He did say that around that time frame that he was habitually late for cases and could not be found at odd times during the day. He says what was happening was he was meeting his main AP at her house before work and during lunch. Yes, same house her son caught them at. This coincides with texts to me during this time frame from my wife to the effect of still waiting on doc. Cases starting late today. The gentleman tells me that administration was starting to take notice as well of his erratic behavior. Complaints were coming in. The gentleman left the hospital around the same time as my wife and went to work at the other facility that OM was working at. He stayed only about 6 months, then retired. He said he couldn't stand it. OM had 2 side pieces there as well and was constantly running back and forth between his office across the street, where he had a bed and sleeping quarters, and the hospital. Was banging these 2 between seeing office patients and cases, and administration was enabling them by looking the other way. He's still there today and is with the AP who the son caught them with. He has not married her though. In talking with the gentleman, I know and doing a little other research, I've found that he's ruined no fewer than 3 marriages and possibly as many as 5. When he came to the hospital where my wife worked, he had been under the radar with his infidelity for the most part to that point in his career, and no one knew anything about him really. They all took him at face value, and he played them all. The reason admin has looked away. He's an excellent surgeon, one of the best in the area, nothing but 5-star ratings everywhere you turn. He's good with patients and families too. The gentleman I confided in says the head administrator where he is now is also a serial cheater, and they are 2 of a kind. He's got the run of the place. It would be a shame if the board of directors there got an anonymous email or perhaps a certified letter containing some details and proof. Would be a real shame. My comment: would you expose the OM in this situation? Should the affair affect his professionalism? Would you go down that path? Part 2 ending coming tomorrow morning, and remember, keep the dogs out of your relationships.